Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and I am back with another video talking about Xbox 360 games that you might want to pick up before Microsoft shuts down the 360 marketplace. That's coming really soon. And like I mentioned, this is the second video I've made on the subject, but I did want to clarify something that came up in the previous one. Many people in the comments were like, hey, about half of these games are available to play on the Xbox One and the Xbox series of consoles, which is great. I knew that going in, and that's the reason why I mixed up that list so that there was a bunch of games that would play only on the 360, but also on newer consoles. But it's important to remember not everybody made the jump from the 360 to the Xbox One or even the Xbox series of consoles. A lot of people kind of got turned off on the Xbox One and jumped over to the PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 5, or even the PC. That said, for this video, I did dig a little bit deeper in there to find the games that, for the most part, you do need to play these on the original Xbox 360, but I couldn't help myself, and so the last game, well, I'm going to be a little selfish because I wanted to talk about it. It's digital only, but thankfully you will be able to play it on your Xbox One or newer console. With that said, let's get started. The first game I want to talk about is called Fatal Inertia, and this is a really interesting one because it's gotten a bit of buzz lately, especially from physical Xbox 360 collectors like myself, where suddenly we're seeing the physical version of this game skyrocket in the last couple months. It's been crazy to watch. And as you can tell by this footage, it is a futuristic hover car arcade racing game that only got a digital release on the PlayStation 3, but its physical Xbox 360 version is the one that a lot of collectors have been trying to find, myself included. I don't have a physical copy of this game. I was actually kind of surprised. I think it's because I assumed I'd always be able to find a cheap copy of it, and now that may not be the case if I do want the physical version. However, thankfully, you can pick up the digital version in the marketplace. This game feels like a mix of Wipeout and Mario Kart, where you slide or drift around corners, you pick up weapons and power-ups. On the surface, this looks like yet another generic racing game, but the surprise here is just how solid and fun this game really is. First off, I think the game looks really good, and the level design is surprisingly nuanced. It requires you to have really good memorization of the twists and turns, but you're also going to need really quick reflexes to get around those tricky parts of the track. And I think that's a big part of the appeal here, is that this is a really decent arcade racing game, despite how generic the name is or kind of lame the cover is. You know, it just looked like a budget title, and maybe when it launched it probably was, but now people who have an Xbox 360, they're looking to play it. Listen, I'm all for physical game releases and having, a game archived forever, but at the current prices that this game is going for lately, it would be really hard for me to recommend most people to go out and spend that amount of money. Instead, do what I did, snag the digital version. That way you can jump in and really check out this really fun arcade racing game. It may just surprise you. Next up is a game that a lot of people will be excited to see on this list. That is the Dishwasher Dead Samurai. This game got great reviews when it was originally launched, and I think looking back, it's interesting to check out because this game is known for being painfully difficult and being just a really brutal 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. But those type of games definitely have their fans. When a lot of games are a little bit too simple, there is something very compelling going into a game like this where you're like determined to beat it, determined to win, determined to get all the achievements. In this game, you're battling through grave sites, opera houses, city streets, and more, and you're taking on robots and ninjas and just kind of a bunch of random baddies. I like how if the enemy is close to death, you can perform an execution move to finish them off. That never gets old. But like I said, this is a very punishing game and also very rewarding if you put the work in. Probably not going to be for everybody. You really have to be into some of the more difficult beat 'em up games. But, you know, people remember this game for a reason, and if you have an Xbox 360, you're going to make sure and want to snag it. Next up is another game I'm very excited to talk about. It is Renegade Ops. This is another really well-reviewed game that unfortunately is not backwards compatible. As you can see by this gameplay footage, at its heart it is a twin-stick shooter. This was published by Sega, and you play as a highly decorated general who basically just takes matters into his own hands to help stop a terrorist. You have 4 characters to choose from, which each of them will give you a bonus to the type of vehicle that you drive, whether it's giving you extra shields that you can activate or maybe different types of weapons to use in battle. And basically what you do is just start the mission and then you cruise around completing primary and secondary objectives in real time. And then you're taking out all of these large enemy vehicles, you're rescuing prisoners, you're doing a bunch of things as you go around this fairly large map. I love how the world is mostly open, where you can stick to the road if you want to, getting to your objectives, or you can try to find your own way through the terrain. And what's fun is that a lot of the things in the world are fully destructible. It's so cool just driving your vehicle through a building and watching it collapse. A lot of people consider this to be a spiritual successor to classic games like Jungle Strike or Desert Strike, and yeah, I can definitely see that. This is a super fun game. You're gonna get addicted to it. It's just a total blast, completely worth playing, and dare I say even a hidden gem on the Xbox 360. There were a ton of arcade shooters released at this time, and the one I want to talk about is Raystorm HD. This particular version never made it to modern consoles. It has an extra mode in here that isn't available in the more recent Ray's Arcade Chronology game that came out on the PlayStation 4, the Switch, and the PC. And so for that reason, a lot of fans of this series, they recommend that you pick this up. As you see by the gameplay footage here, it is a gorgeous vertical shoot 'em up with fully 3D graphics, and it's also widescreen. So many vertical arcade shooters will only take up the center part of your TV screen, so I appreciate how this one's just nice and big and in your face. A cool feature here that I really appreciate is that you can turn on the auto fire of your missiles if you want, meaning that once you have a lock on the enemy, the missiles will automatically fire and take them out. Now, that may sound like it makes the game a little easy, but let me assure you, this game is very fast, very difficult, even with that option turned on. That extra mode adds enhanced graphics from the arcade original, plus it adds additional enemies and tougher bosses. Also, the game overall is a little bit more difficult, and they put on a different ending. However, they give you plenty of continues to help you get through it as you learn the different levels and also the enemy patterns. Another shooter I want to mention really quick that I don't believe is backwards compatible is 1942 Joint Strike. I am a massive fan of the original 1942. Playing that in the arcades, absolutely loved it. And as you see here, this is a full 3D and HD update to that game. A couple things I noticed here is that this definitely feels a little bit more responsive and also a tad easier because it gives you a health meter instead of just getting those one-hit deaths. There's also a charge attack if you hold down the fire button, so a little bit more nuance here as you're playing the game. Now personally, I love the original with its pixel art graphics, and I would say this is a pretty decent upgrade. It does look a little cheap or something. I don't know, it's hard to put my finger on. I guess I would say I don't necessarily love the new visuals, but I think they're just okay. Now for something completely different, this is Eternal Sonata. This is a fantastic RPG by the company Crescendo. That's a studio behind some of those beloved Star Ocean games, Tales games, Baten Kaitos, and a ton more. This is a fairly unique RPG because it focuses on the Polish composer Frédéric Chopin, who died from tuberculosis. And this game creates a fictional dream world that takes place during the last few hours of his life. And so in this game, Frédéric Chopin plays the main role, and the game focuses around his life and his music. It's a pretty unique concept, to say the least. You'll travel through the game with a party of up to 12 characters. You'll be interacting with NPCs, you'll be visiting towns and villages to buy and sell stuff, and then you engage in turn-based combat and more. I especially like how they use whether you're standing in light or shadow to change up how the combat works. I don't think I've ever seen that before. And as you see by this footage, the graphics are nice and colorful too. You can really tell that some love and detail went into making this pretty unique RPG. And it's a beefy game too, taking about 40 hours to complete if you want to do everything in it. And you know, it only costs $15 for the digital version, which I think is actually a pretty good value. And it's got enough heart and charm to really stand out. It's a pretty special game, and fans of Japanese RPGs should definitely pick it up. All right, here's a little controversy. So I'm going to talk about Ridge Racer Unbounded. Now, as you can tell, I'm very excited to talk about this arcade racing game, but unfortunately, it's a bit misunderstood, and honestly, I think it's way better than you might think. This game was developed by Bugbear. That's the company behind arcade racing games like Flatout and also Wreckfest. However, those games play nothing like traditional Ridge Racer games, not at all. But for some reason, Namco wanted them to make a Ridge Racer game, and the result is something that really turned off fans of the franchise when it launched. And to be honest, I get it. I think they were basically just trying to kind of reboot the series, I guess. The end result is that this game looks and plays completely different to any other Ridge Racer game. It plays more like a Burnout game, or I guess Split Second if you've ever played that really fun game. It's a mix of that. Now, a big focus of the game is drifting, as you would expect, but it's also got in there where you battle cars and you use the destruction of the environment. That's kind of the new features that they've brought to it. And that's really not that surprising because that's what Bugbear does best. That's what they bring to the Flatout and the Wreckfest series. It's just that they're shoving that into a Ridge Racer game. Now, one common complaint is that the drifting feels really different in this game than any others in the series. And you know, that's a bummer because you do need to play this game for a couple levels to get the feel of it and actually start winning races. That's at least my experience. When I first fired this up, yeah, I was losing pretty badly, but then you learn how the drifting works in this game compared to other Ridge Racer games, and that's when you get it, and that's when this game becomes fun. And then it just completely opens up from there, man. This is way more fun than I expected it to be. Again, just don't go into it thinking that it's a traditional Ridge Racer game and you'll be fine. Now, the good news is there is a really cheap physical version, both for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 if you want. And it's also available on the PC. I have it on my Steam Deck as well. But if you haven't played this game and you have an Xbox 360 and you like arcade racing games like this, you might want to snag the digital version while you can. You'll thank me later. Next up is a game I'm a little surprised to see is not backwards compatible on the Xbox One or series of consoles, and that is Warhammer 40k Space Marine. This is a really high quality third-person shooter mixed in with hack and slash, and it was developed by Relic Entertainment and then published by THQ. Relic Entertainment have been around for a while. They've made several loved games, including Homeworld on the PC, Company of Heroes, Age of Empires 4, and a bunch more. This game has you taking on hordes of orcs and also the forces of chaos as you're pushing your way through to your objective. And while you're doing that, you're going back and forth between melee attacks and shooting. That's the mechanic of this game. You're not always doing melee, and you're not always doing shooting. You're mixing it up all the time. You're doing that because the game throws a lot at you, so you really need to watch your health here. However, you can quickly refill it by doing a finishing move on an enemy that you've beaten down. You'll get a button press option there, and then you'll take them down, and then your health gets back up. So that's cool. And as you see by this footage, the graphics are pretty good, right? And the action is pretty much non-stop. It pauses every once in a while to maybe do a cutscene here and there and progress the story, but for the most part, you are just cutting down enemies left and right. And I found exploring the environments pretty fun and interesting. Now, there is a sequel finally coming to modern systems, and, I guess maybe one day we'll get a remaster of this game as well. Who knows, right? But as of now, I want to recommend you pick up this one, either the physical or digital version if you have an Xbox 360. There is also a PlayStation 3 version as well, if you prefer that console. Next up is Crimson Alliance. So this is a co-op action RPG that was published by Microsoft, and it's only available on the Xbox 360. Initially, when this game launched, it was free to try, but then you could spend, I think it was 800 to 1200 Microsoft points to unlock all the character classes. I mention that because you need to consider that before the store closes if you decide to pick this up, because you can download it for free, but it won't give you access to all of the characters that you may want to play as. At its core, it's a pretty standard Diablo-style RPG where you have different characters with specific attack methods. The wizard will use a long-range attack, as you might expect. The mercenary has melee, and the assassin is a bit of a mix of the two. There are secret areas in each level to try to find, and I found that the levels were varied enough that it kept me interested while I was, hacking away at enemies and trying to find gold to upgrade my weapons and armor. Now, is this a must-own? Probably not, since there are a lot of these type of games and experiences today that you could play on, newer systems. But I wanted to highlight it here one last time as, that store closes. This game may go away forever. All right, and finally, the one game on this list that is backwards compatible on the Xbox One and Series X. That, of course, is my beloved Hydro Thunder Hurricane. I've always loved this game. I've been playing it for years, and it's just a masterpiece. Sadly, there is no physical version of this game, which really bums me out. It actually bums me out so much that when I ran into the developer years ago at a gaming expo, I begged, I pleaded with them to eventually put out a physical version. Seriously, it's a holy grail game for me, and it deserves a special physical version of it. It's so stupid why we didn't get one. Now, if you played Hydro Thunder in the arcades or on the N64, or the PlayStation, or the Dreamcast, you know why these games are so much fun. They're amazing arcade racing games that don't come around very often. And Hydro Thunder Hurricane is a fantastic sequel. As you see by this footage here, the graphics are great. They're very colorful. The level design is detailed and inventive. The water mechanics are still amazing and feel right even today. Also, I love the amount of hidden shortcuts and things to discover all over this game, on every level. If you can't tell by the tone of my voice, this is one of my favorite arcade racing games from this era. It's still a blast to play. So if you like these type of games, please go buy the digital version. I don't care if you get it on the 360 or the Xbox One or the Series X. Just make sure that you have this on your hard drive. You won't be disappointed. And so that, guys, is another video of Xbox 360 games that you probably should check out before Microsoft shuts down the marketplace forever. It's going to be a sad day. If there's any games that you think I've missed or should cover in a future video, please let me know down in the comments below. And as always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.